What's on Tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. Sundays are easy to enjoy when they're full of football and the fridge is filled with beer. These are the games we're locking in on as we show you some of the highest point totals here. We're going to start with the Bengals, who are 5.5-point favorites, led by Batman himself, against the Cowboys. They are at Dallas. The over-under is 49.5. Here are the fantasy notable players here. Denny, I pose this question to you. Are you starting any Dallas Cowboys besides CeeDee Lamb and Rico Dowdle this week?
Well, Dowdle is in a good spot. I just want folks to know. We talked about him on the Road to World Football show yesterday on Thursday, and he needs to be in lineups this week. But I guess Jake Ferguson. I mean, I actually would go with the aforementioned Will Dissly over Ferguson, just because I think the Cowboys are going to want to be run heavy and lay off the drop backs. Will they be able to? I guess that's another question entirely. But Ferguson is interesting. Beyond that, I don't know if I can trust Brandon Cooks as anything more than like a wide receiver 4 here.
Yeah. People don't actually realize this is a revenge game because Cooper Rush was outbid on the Batmobile by Joe Burrow, which is a tough break for Cooper Rush. Yeah, they told him he doesn't have enough money. I think this is an awesome matchup for Jake Ferguson. The Bengals are horrific against tight ends. We saw what Pat Fryermuth did, revitalizing his season by just eviscerating them last week. So very favorable matchup for Ferguson. It's strange, like the Cowboys, they seem like a mess, but at the same time, it's like, well, you've got these 3 guys in Dowdle, Lamb, and Ferguson who are all pretty startable, and then you have a defense as well that is playing a bit better. So I think this is going to be a more compelling matchup than certainly it looked like a couple of weeks ago when the Cowboys were spiraling.
At the rate the Bengals are scoring at, Jay, and the spread being 5.5, which is somewhat reasonable, it kind of tells you that it could force the Cowboys to get away from Denny's point. Like, this is a good spot for Rico Dowdle unless they have to throw a lot. 49.5 actually seems like a reasonable total that can go over.
Yeah, and I mean, if you work backwards from that, the line is 5.5. So the market is expecting that the average score in this game is going to be like 27-22, that type of range. And if the Cowboys score 22 points, like that's a pretty good outcome in terms of the potential value of Dowdle, Lamb, and Ferguson. So yeah, I think this is going to be a shootout.
All right, our next game here, the Bills are 3.5-point favorites at the Rams. The over-under in this is also 49.5. Denny, we talk about this with the Packers a lot, and in a way it's happened with the Bills. Can you trust any pass catchers in this offense, especially against a defense that you highlighted earlier? They'll probably want to run against to the point where Ray Davis could be viable in this game.
Right, and so yeah, I mean, if I'm making a bet that Ray Davis will be viable, then along with that bet comes very low target volume for everybody else involved, including Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Amari Cooper, the rest of them. If Dalton Kincaid is back, I think he's a very shaky option here against LA. So the Rams play like a ton of too high, right? And they invite teams to run the ball, and I think the Bills will take that bait. Okay, and we've seen the Bills go way under their expected pass rate in previous games. 6-8 weeks ago they were doing it quite often, and in those games you would have one guy exceed 5 targets, and I think that's what we're going to have here. So I think you can start Shakir in PPR formats where there's like multiple flex spots, but I really would try to avoid these pass catchers for Buffalo.
Will be an interesting chess match because if the Rams are doing that and they're inviting the Bills to take the bait, but then the Bills are taking the bait for running for 6.5 yards a carry and 60% success rate, then I'm not sure really what the end game is there. But I think the most interesting guy of the Bills pass catchers, Connor, is Amari Cooper, who we thought would come in and revolutionize their passing game and give Josh Allen a true number 1. Now, it's been a little bit weird because he's been injured and there's a snow game and they just haven't really had to throw because they're really good and they're not in these throw scripts all the time. But do you think it's going to happen for Amari Cooper?
Well, he gets the touchdown in his debut, right? And we joked about it on the show, but really, like, not only half jokingly, it felt forced. It's like, get this guy going, and he looked great, and you're like, oh, this is going to work. The problem for me, Denny, is quite simply he's not on the field enough to earn enough targets to be fantasy viable. And until that changes, how could you even consider starting Amari Cooper, borderline rostering him right now? I mean, 53% route participation since he's got the Bills, which has led to an 11% target share. If you're not on the field, you're not going to get targets. And the Bills have so many different options in this offense. They're not forcing Amari Cooper on the field just because they traded for him. So, no, to answer your question, Jay, no, like if you've waited this long, it's probably hurting you significantly at this point.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes guys can get away with having a low route participation rate like Cooper has in Buffalo. Like DeAndre Hopkins, similar situation in Kansas City, but Hopkins is seeing a target on about 25% of his pass routes. So that sort of counteracts that situation. That's not the case with Amari Cooper. He's not a priority, I guess, for Josh Allen and this offense. And so even with 6 teams on bye, honestly, I feel like you could do better. Like I would say, just off the top of my head, a guy like Parker Washington seems like a better option than Amari Cooper this week.
And the last note on the Bills here, guys, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, since week 3, only 3 tight ends have had more than 45 receiving yards against the Rams. He's coming off injury. And honestly, as talented as Dalton Kincaid is, he wasn't that great in fantasy before he got hurt.
No, and he is in an offense that doesn't throw the ball a ton because they don't need to, because the running game is so good and they've got such a favorable matchup. Like, where does he slot into the pecking order? Like Khalil Shakir. The issue is that Shakir is Allen's guy. Like, he seems to have the best rapport with Allen, and Shakir runs kind of like tight end type of route trees, where he's taking the short stuff, he's taking the stuff over the middle of the field. So Dalton Kincaid, like, if you drafted him and you have him on your team, you probably don't have a better option. But I mean, if you've been able to pick up like a Will Dissly off the waiver wire, Will Dissly to me is much more appealing than Kincaid this week.
Denny, for the Rams side of it, is there anything noteworthy to you besides the staples? Obviously, Puka and Kupp and Stafford and Kyron. Corm's getting a little bit more work, but it hasn't mattered. Demarcus Robinson is looking on the right track to be healthy again, but feels like a desperation play.
I guess if you think that the Rams are going to be playing from behind here and chasing points, then Demarcus Robinson comes into play just purely as a drop back volume driven option. But really, we know where the ball goes in this offense. It's to Puka, it's to Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp's in a great spot, by the way, against the Bills defense that allows a lot of short area reception. So it would seem to be a slightly Cooper Kupp week over Puka to me. But beyond that, you're hoping that Kyron Williams gets that touchdown. Otherwise, you don't have much, because with the receivers back in the fold, he's not seeing much pass game involvement at all. I'm not too worried about Blake Corum's usage. It's like, midfield carries. Like, who cares about that? We just need that inside the 10 work from Kyron Williams, which I think we can get here.
Our last game, guys, is the Panthers at Eagles, because the point total is up to 46. The Eagles are favored right now by 13 points in this game, Jay. Looking at their offense, this is a game where we think they'll be playing with a significant lead. We think they'll be able to lean on the run game to close it out. Do you start or sit Devontae Smith in his first game back?
So I think with Dallas Goedert not going to play, that Devontae Smith, he becomes much more viable. His performances when Goedert has been out have been great since 2022 in games that Goedert has missed, which has been 11 games where Smith has played. He averages almost 17 points per game and a 28% target share. Now, the issue that counteracts against that is that the Eagles are pushing up to being 13-point favorites. Saquon Barkley's rushing prop is inching towards 115, which is one of the highest of all time, or at least in recent history. So I think that this is going to be a game where they do run the ball, but if Devontae Smith is out there, if he's healthy, then I think you feel okay starting him and expecting that he's going to be a low-end wide receiver too.
I have a rather depressing stat for folks who have rostered A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. The Eagles this year, 35% pass rate when leading, which is by far the lowest in the league. So when they grab a lead, it's over for these pass catchers. And against the Panthers, I feel like that's, a probability. Let's just say that kindly.
Denny, on the Panthers side of things, we've talked a lot this week about, the potential split incoming with Chuba and Jonathan Brooks getting more work. But on their pass-catching side of things, this is a game where you're scared of the Eagles' defense. The secondary has been much better thanks to the rookie additions to Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But you can argue they should be throwing because they'll be playing from behind. Where does that put Xavier Legette and Bryce's favorite target in Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I know. I think that they're in play. Again, 6 teams on bye, so that factors into it. But Legette and Thielen, and to a lesser extent, like the aforementioned Jatavian Sanders, Jalen Coker, maybe let's get crazy with some Jalen Coker. These guys are in play because I could see Bryce Young dropping back 40-plus times here. And, Bryce Young has been playing, Jay mentioned this, well enough, not fantastic, but well enough to provide production for more than one pass catcher. Okay, so you can split up 250, 300 yards among 2 or 3 guys and have fantasy viable outings. But before this renaissance from Bryce Young, you had to split that up between 150 yards between 2 or 3 guys. So I do think that folks should not just like pull the cord on the Carolina pass catchers because they're taking on a tough Eagles defense.
Yep. I think one other thing too about specifically this game is that not all 13-point dogs are created equal in terms of being in a throw script and having the ball. Like, it's different. It's worse for Bryce Young in terms of the throw script when he's going up against a team that has the best rushing attack in football, because he's just not going to have the ball that much, I think. Even if they are down, like, the Eagles could have 38 minutes time of possession in this game with how effectively they're going to run it. So, yeah, I think that these guys like Thielen and Sanders are definitely interesting, but Bryce Young, I suspect that he may just not have the ball a ton.
That's a good point.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.